5 asset classes not normally correlated are all going to go up together. Gold, Bitcoin, stocks, bonds, and the dollar. It's going to be a massive safe haven trade as Europe collapses.
Tom Luongo, geopolitical analyst and markets expert, reveals what he thinks will happen as the euro continues to weaken due to political uncertainty and energy dependence.
You know, threatening the world with nuclear war, that's kind of, I mean, once you go nuclear, you've got nothing else you can threaten people with, right? What you're watching now, I think, is the death throes of the people who really thought that they had everything buttoned up.
And while Europe struggles, Tom shares his reasoning for an unpopular opinion on American interest rates.
Powell's going to cut rates harder under Trump than he would have under Kamala Harris. I know that sounds backwards, but it's true.
Post-election analysis, geopolitical updates, and timely financial predictions. This conversation will keep you fully in the loop at a time when you may need it most. It's a brave new world.
Maybe.
How are we getting rugged? That's what I want to know.
I'm sorry?
How are we getting rugged? It feels too good to be true.
No, we're not going to get rug pulled down with this one. This is what you're watching now, I think, is the death throes of the people who, you know, really thought that they had everything buttoned up. I mean, you know, the last couple of times we've talked, Marty, it's been, you know, having to go through the scenarios where things could go wrong. Right. And I think we did a lot of that. And, you know, it's funny. And I saw the thing, the tweet you put out the other day of the excerpt you did of one of the last conversations we did, and I was like, yeah, that was definitely where I was thinking in, I don't know, July or September or wherever we were, but you know, that was one scenario, and part of that scenario is still on the table. Like we're doing this. This is November 19th. We're 12, 14, 16 hours since, you know, somebody shot something that was supposedly ATACMS into Russia, breaking red lines, right, with the Russians. But the Russians haven't responded yet. You know, I was talking with Dexter White this morning about all these things, and he knows much more about the capabilities of all these weapon systems than I will ever learn, because this is what he does with his spare time. I play World of Warcraft to decompress. He reads about what U.S. and Russian weapon systems. And the reality is, I think, if I understood his point correctly, is that the ATACMS that we sent Ukraine that we know are in country only have a range of 100 miles. And these things shot off an effective range of 100 miles. And these things were pinpoint targeted at 140. So really, or were these storm shadows? Or were these scalps? Because we know that the Brits have sent those into Ukraine. We know that the operation and the incursion into Kursk was designed and operated and blessed by the British. The goal being, of course, that, you know, okay, let's take some Russian territory. Let's embarrass Putin. Typical British position on neocon position, British position on this. And then at the moment when our bond markets, their bond markets, the British and the German, start to break down, when the governments start to come under serious attack, we got the German government that's already fallen. Lo and behold, we get this thing happen over a weekend where Joe Biden is reported, which I don't believe, to have blessed this. And then 48 hours later, the missiles fly. Two things. I don't believe that Biden authorized anything. And two, I'm not completely convinced that these were U.S. ATACMS. So now the question is, why would Russia and the United States both go through the process of the charade of saying they were ATACMS and go along with the narrative? Well, this just literally just popped into my head as I'm going through this, because I hadn't framed it with that question in mind, right? Well, let's think back to the IL-20, the IL-76 shoot down over Syria in 2019. Supposedly, the story is that the Israelis were in the area, and the guys manning the Syrian S-200 systems got confused between the Israeli plane that they wanted to shoot and the Russian plane. They hit the Russian plane by mistake. That was the story. That was the story that everybody was sold. My good friend Joaquin Flores, at the time writing for either his own, he wasn't writing for Strategic Culture at the time. He was writing for his own site. And now I can't know the name of that site I'm blanking on, but he went through chapter and verse how that S-200 could never have hit that IL-20 plane, Eland plane, because it was like 260% out of its range. Couldn't shoot that far. Scrubbed from the internet were reports that there were missile launches fired from French and UK frigates in the area at the same time. So the conclusion we all drew in the alternative geopolitical space was that Netanyahu, the Russians, and the Americans, and the Syrians all took one on the chin in order to cover up British and or French perfidy in an attempt to start World War III via a NATO Article 5 invocation of some form or another. And that and that's what happened. So is this a kind of same thing that's happening today? I'm not saying this is true. I am running a scenario for y'all to error check. That's what I'm doing. And nothing more, nothing less. But we have precedent for these things. So it would make sense that the Russians would blame the Americans for this, and it would make sense for the Americans to take the blame. Because if the British were the ones that actually gave the Ukrainians the green light, and rogue elements of the American, either military or the intelligence services, gave help to this attack with the satellite service, then the deconfliction hotline is running really, really high right now and working overtime to stop all this. That's what that sadly makes the most sense to me. And so that's where I am.
And it aligns with one of the theories we discussed the last time you were on a couple months ago, lead up to the election. I think you laid out two scenarios, or maybe three. Make it too big to rig. Two scenarios. Make it too big to rig.
Right.
So there's no question, which is exactly what happened. And the two scenarios after that were if it wasn't too big to rig, the one scenario was tie him up in lawfare, try to take it to the courts, and have Constitution step in and be like, we're going to make sure that he doesn't get in. Too big to rig. That's not possible. Fallback plan is World War III. It seems like fallback plan to the 14th Amendment, which Jamie Raskin has been talking about, is nonsense. Trump's not an insurrectionist. The other one, of course, is, and if you look through it, I wrote a big tweet the other day about this. It was popping into my head because and we're not done with the actual get here. Start World War III. Okay. Leave Trump with a war that he can't get out of easily, which has been my theory for 2 years now. Like, they don't kill him and he wins the election, then you just leave him with a bunch of poison pills that he can't fix quickly, that everybody wants him to fix. That's also, that also rhymes with history, with the very people who are involved in this particular thing. When you mix that with the movements in the bond markets, which is what I was talking about for my clients at Newsmax this morning, it's pretty, and I was just looking at the charts. I'm like, well, how do you stop a meltdown in the long end of the melt up in the long end of everybody's yield curve? Because now Trump's going to come to power. There's going to be a recession because he's going to take an axe to the government. There's going to be a lot of turmoil. And so the long end of the yield curve should rise in yield in order to offset the risk of, some political infighting and all the rest of it. Fine. Okay. And the potential for a recession. Fine. I want higher yields, and that has to be fought, because if the U.S. yield curve sells off, then everybody else's yield curve has to sell off, because there's trillions of dollars of currency and interest rate swaps that are out there, and hedges and all of it that are tied to specific ranges of spreads between one sovereign debt and the other, or one currency's exchange rate versus the other. This is just the practicality of living in this world, right? And that's not going to change, by the way, if Bitcoin takes over. The denominator in all of these things will be Bitcoin as opposed to the US dollar, right? It's still going to be the same processes are still going to be there. Just to remind everybody that, we're not there, that even the future world is still going to have some vestiges of this. So it's incumbent upon everybody to bone up on these skills and bone up on this type of analysis in order to be able to be better at trying to handicap what's going on next. That's what I've been trying to do. I know that's what you've been trying to do, and and all of it. So, so what a shock to find out that with the euro and the pound last week breaking down hard. The pound hit 126, the euro hit a low below 105, just briefly below 105. Like, it was a big move down. Oil didn't move in price. Therefore, now energy prices, relatively speaking, are rising for the Europeans, even if oil prices stay flat, because their currency buys fewer barrels of oil. And then that translates into the need for higher bond yields. So if we have the US yield curve selling off, then the German yield curve should sell off, and the UK yield curve should sell off, and the French yield curve, and the Italians and everybody else's. That's just the way these things are going to work. Well, we get to the red lines of the German 10-year, around 2.4% currently is what Christine Lagarde has been defending, and about 4.5% on the UK gilt, 10-year gilt. And lo and behold, someone engineers a moment where money needs to go to ground and go to the deepest, most liquid markets in the world, i.e. the safe haven of safe haven assets in today's world for many, many financial players. Maybe not the Bitcoiners in the audience, maybe not the gold bugs in the audience, but certainly for the pension funds and the 2 and 20 carried interest rate guys and all of that, and all of that world, which doesn't deal in those assets, and that's fine. Those guys are going to move into U.S. Treasuries. Like it or not, doesn't matter whether you like it, that's the reality. And so you can see that if you engineer a rally in the U.S. Treasury, well, what does that also engineer a rally in, or at least arrest the sell-off in? The UK gilt, the German Bund, the French bonds. I don't remember the name of the French bonds. Italian BTPs, and all the rest of it. Interestingly, Japanese debt kept selling off because Japanese aren't defending that anymore because they need higher yields, and they're not fighting higher yields. They're just allowing the long end of their yield curve to rise in stages, but they're not fighting a limit anymore. They're above their stated limit of 1% on the 10-year. So you put all of that together, and that's where I think we are. And I think Putin understands this. I hope Trump understands it. And now it's just a matter of everybody, keeping the hotlines open, keeping the lines of communications open to let real information flow to both sides, while those who are twisting in the wind, those who are, who are swimming naked as the tide goes out, let them twist in the wind. Like, as I mix metaphors, like so much linguistic concrete. But you get what I'm saying.
Sup, freaks? This rip of TFTC was brought to you by our good friends at Bitkey. Bitkey makes Bitcoin easy to use and hard to lose. It is a hardware wallet that natively embeds into a 2 or 3 multi-sig. You have one key on the hardware wallet, one key on your mobile device, and Block stores a key in the cloud for you. This is an incredible hardware device for your friends and family, or maybe yourself, who have Bitcoin on exchanges and have for a long time, but haven't taken the step to self-custody because they're worried about the complications of setting up a private public key pair, securing that seed phrase, setting up a PIN, setting up a passphrase. Again, Bitkey makes it easy to use, hard to lose. It's the easiest 0 to 1 step, your first step to self-custody. If you have friends and family on the exchanges who haven't moved it off, tell them to pick up a Bitkey. Go to bitkey.world, use the key TFTC20 at checkout for 20% off your order. That's bitkey.world, code TFTC20. This rip is also brought to you by our good friends at Coinkite. Coinkite builds the best Bitcoin hardware in the world. There is no second best when it comes to Bitcoin hardware. If you're looking to secure and self-custody your Bitcoin, you can get the MK4 or the Cold Card Q. Cold Card Q has a full keyboard, a QR scanner, NFC enabled, has a battery pack, put some AA batteries in there, create private public keys, off pair in an air gap fashion. Private keys never have to touch an online device. They have their SATS card, which is the best way to give Bitcoin. If you're looking to gift Bitcoin for a wedding, a birthday party, a communion, a bar mitzvah, whatever it may be, tap the card on the back of your phone. You get an address to send to. You send it to that address. It lives on the SATS card. Again, there is no second best when it comes to Bitcoin hardware. The Bitcoin price seems to be going up. You want to take care of your security before Bitcoin goes to six figures. Make sure you get your Bitcoin off exchanges using Coinkite hardware. MK4, Cold Card Q. Go to coinkite.com. Use the code TFTC. We have a code now, TFTC, for 5% off at checkout. I think the signal to me that Trump, maybe not that he knows exactly what's going on, but is cognizant that there is something going on and he should make a very strategic decision that could affect the outcome of all this, is the lead up to the announcement of the Treasury Secretary. It seems like that is a position that he's thinking very long and hard about and taking a lot of console around.
Yeah, he should. He should. It's the most important position in this administration, because ultimately, if I've been right about what I've been laying out about the Fed and the Treasury and the fight between Powell and Yellen and all this stuff, y'all salt all that analysis to taste. I don't care. I happen to think I'm right, but I'm also willing to admit that I may be wrong. Right. But if I'm right about all that, and that's our boundary condition for the thought experiment, then who's ever at Treasury has to be a person willing to work with Powell hand in glove to deliver a monetary and fiscal policy that's aligned with the new incoming administration. And we don't have any more infighting. We had infighting, globalist Yellen versus my argument, sovereigntist Powell. But now we've got sovereigntists in charge. So the Treasury Secretary can't be the globalist snake in the grass, which is what the GOP is arguing for. At every turn, they keep trying to throw these globalist, snakes in the garden into the mix. And so far, Trump has, I think, done a very good job of resisting that. We can discuss Secretary of State. We can discuss some of those other people, but I don't think they're not germane to this phase of the conversation. We can have that conversation a little later if you want. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But for right here, right now, if he makes the right decision about Treasury Secretary, and I'll be honest with you, all of the people that have been floated don't have a lot of upside. Like Scott Bessent has a lot. I think it's Bessent, right? Has a lot of upside because he knows where Soros's bodies are buried. I look at him and I say, he could easily be Jim Rogers. Because Rogers used to run a fund with Soros. And when he figured out what Soros was, he left.
Yeah, that's a lot of people are fear-mongering around Scott Bessent due to his Soros connection. I actually know a few people in my network who work at the Soros fund, and they're completely diametrically opposed to his worldview as well. So I think the idea of somebody worked at the Soros fund in the past, who knows? They may be aligned with him and his view of the world to some extent, but you mentioned Jim Rogers. I know another, and they do not share the same worldview.
Right. And remember, just because you worked for somebody doesn't mean you agree with them. It was a job opportunity. You took it and you worked with it, and then you put it on your resume, and then you went on to other things. Like, that kind of analysis of he worked with this one, he connects to him. That's a world that doesn't allow for growth, forgiveness, nuance, or anything else. It's just tracing connections, and it doesn't really mean anything, right? Unless you dig in and find real meat on those bones, it's analysis that doesn't. It's a fact that doesn't have any significance. There are lots of facts in the world that are not really all that interesting. There are lots of facts in the world that aren't interesting. I have a fact for you. I have like 140 board games. Is that an interesting fact? No, it's not. No one gives a fuck. Like, you know what I mean? And you shouldn't, other than maybe that, Tom's like insane that he owns 140 board games. Well, okay. And maybe that colors your analysis of me. Okay, maybe in that respect it's interesting. But, anything beyond that, you really shouldn't, because it is what it is. Like part of that, I can, whatever. We can draw whatever conclusions from that fact you want, but it isn't necessarily germane to the current conversation. Same thing with Scott Bessent or, in the past, Jim Rogers. Like I've never question Jim Rogers. It's very obvious. I've met Jim Rogers. I've been in the room with the man. It's very obvious that he's too much of a gentleman to say what he actually thinks of George Soros. That's simple. You see it on his face.
Yeah. No, when it comes to Bessent too, I mean, we were talking about this before we hit record, but appreciate what Howard Lutnick has done for Bitcoin as an advocate, but in terms of becoming Treasury Secretary, I'm happy that he's in the commerce.
Yeah.
Head of commerce, because I think Treasury Secretary needs somebody. Lutnick comes off to me like a brute, like just knows how to make money, goes in. I think we need somebody very strategic.
Yeah.
When it comes to Treasury Secretary, particularly if we're running with your thesis, which seems to be becoming more true by the day.
More true by the day, right? And I'm happy to have been right about it. Like, not because it's my ego, but because, dude, it gives us some hope that maybe all this is going to work out. That's what I mean, this is not about, fuck. This is about, if it's about anybody associated with me, it's about my daughter. Okay. If you guys want to know what my freaking motivation is to try and find like a ray of hope in this world, is because I'm trying to figure out how to navigate, to leave my daughter a world that doesn't suck. Okay. And, she's 18 and all the rest of it. So that's where we are. And so I can see that about Lutnick. I'll actually further your point. I agree with you completely. We need somebody at Secretary. Dave Collin made this point when I was on with him and Jim Kunstler and Tommy Kerrigan about a week and a half ago, right after the election. And Dave said he loved the idea of Stan Druckenmiller because Druckenmiller understands plumbing. He understands the markets. He's never lost money. I mean, relatively speaking, on an annual basis, the man's never lost money. And he said, this was very early in the conversation, the Friday after the election. And Bessent has got Druckenmiller's approval, saying exactly what Collin said about Druckenmiller. So, I'm okay with that. If that's what we are going to need, a guy who understands way money actually flows through these accounts and through all of these channels. And then how the Fed helps to manage that. And if they're on the same page about how to change the flow of dollars around the world such that more dollars that are produced circulate domestically as opposed to constantly being sent out overseas to colonize the world, which is what we've been doing. If they're both on the same page there, because it's clear that's what Powell's been doing. And it's clear that Yellen's been trying to do the opposite. If we have a Treasury Secretary who understands what Powell's doing, how he's doing it, and why it's significant, this could all change very quickly. And the dollar index is responding to that. And the clearest chart for anybody to watch is the dollar index chart. We're threatening a November breakout of a 2.5-year band below 106. Well, 106.5. We closed at 106.62 on the dollar index on the end of this month. Dude, we're going to 120 on the dollar. Like, me and Francis Hunter are going to be like, deciding, it's going to decide, who was more right. Like, they're going to be hilarious. I'll be like, no, Francis, you can run with that. If you need to be more right than I am, if that's important to you, you can go ahead and do it. I'm picking on Francis. He's good. He's a friend. I love Francis a lot, and I've been on his show many times. But yeah, I don't know. Like, that's what I see. And, Martin Armstrong will eventually wind up being right as well. And 120 on the dollar index will be a bad scene. Okay. But it'll be a necessary bad scene for us to get through in order to get to the other side of this. Transition states are always messy, but it's a dollar index at 120 in say by the end of 2025 is indicative of a transition state from one set of monetary parameters or one way of looking at the world to another state. And it's like a chemical reaction that has to go through a transition state. And the dollar, and this thing of the dollar index at 120, paying off Brent Johnson's milkshake theory, is that necessary transition state. In very broad kind of metaphoric terms for the layman to understand.
I mean, with that in mind, too, if we're running with Bessent, I've seen Senator Bill Hagerty
right
floated as well, and I've personally met Senator Hagerty, and I'm not, to be honest, not sure about his knowledge in terms of the interworkings of the plumbing, which you described earlier. But I do know he was tapped during Trump's last administration. Bill, I need you in Japan to go fix stuff. He went and did that, and I know he's on board to make sure that if there is a mandate to change things and he's tasked to do that, he will do. I believe he will do what is necessary to get the job done. But with all that in mind, when you factor in, I guess we're running with the assumption now because it hasn't been announced, whether it's Bessent, Haggerty, somebody like them that gets put in this position. You factor in the tariffs, the tax policy, Doge. What do the mechanics look like if all that's in place to get us through that transitionary period? What are the types?
What it looks like? Yeah, that's a good question. It's a good way of looking at it. What I'll say is this. You're going to have that weird moment that Martin Armstrong's been warning us about for a long, long time, where 5 asset classes are not normally correlated are all going to go up together: gold, Bitcoin, stocks, bonds, and the dollar. It's going to be a massive safe haven trade as Europe collapses. The dollar could go to 120 or even 130 because the euro is going to collapse to 50 cents. The pound collapses to 80 cents. Okay, the yen. The yen holds in the 150s while the Japanese divest themselves of a lot of their dollar holdings in order to defend the yen. We get another round of commodity cost push inflation because you're going to see the following. Powell's going to cut rates harder under Trump than he would have under Kamala Harris. I know that sounds backwards, but it's not. But it's true. Especially if the dollar goes higher, that means there's a massive demand for dollars, and to blunt that rise, you cut credit more aggressively than you would have otherwise. It also would then support a massive cutting of domestic spending, which is going to be deflationary. There's going to be some tariffs. That's going to be deflationary. There's a lot of things that are going to be deflationary. There's going to be deregulation at the same time, which will be inflationary because it's going to put an upward demand on raw goods as the markets unfuck themselves. Powell's going to cut interest rates, which means just credit's going to flow more freely, which is going to be a little inflationary. So what Powell's trying to do is, and what Powell and the Treasury have to manage here is how to balance the deflationary forces of cutting some spending. The Fed's still continuing to shrink its balance sheet. Very important. Powell's still doing QT, by the way, while this is going on. And cutting interest rates. So we've got deflation, but then you're going to cut interest rates, and then you're going to have commodity, and that's going to unlock commodity demand as people start to try and invest and buy things and do things because the lack of regulation. I mean, if Vivek Ramaswamy is serious about what he's saying, he has a mandate to stop all of this unconstitutional regulatory miasma that was put into effect under the Chevron doctrine. It's not, now we get to sue the government to get these cases overturned. No, these cases are already been adjudicated as unconstitutional, and all of this stuff is null and void. CAFE, RINs, the Clean Air Act, all this stuff, every bit of it. And if they're serious about that, dude, the disruption is I can't even describe the disruption. I can't fathom it. I can't imagine it. Okay, and I got a big imagination. Right. So, like it could be big. So on the other side of that, Powell is going to have to accommodate this. And if he wants to have a non-adversarial relationship with the Treasury Department and with the president, well, the president's going to want lower interest rates because he needs to fix the entitlement, the payout, the cost of the entitlement systems. Right. And he needs to fund that debt and fund the rollover of the debt and everything else at lower interest rates. Moreover, and Powell should be able to give him that. But it doesn't mean that he's going back to zero bound. It means he's going to go back to 3% as opposed to 4%.
Well, on the rollover topic, do you worry about that with the last 2 cuts? Despite the cuts, the long end of the yield curve has gone up. Like, do they have to get that under control first?
I don't worry about it too much because I don't think anybody's willing to give us duration yet.
Okay.
What you're going to see is Powell cut the short end, cut to create an upwardly sloping yield curve at current long end prices. Because you're going to have to, there's going to be sincere demand for the long end of the curve still. Because there's still going to be demand for the U.S. Treasuries as collateral. Okay, it's still going to be in the system. And if Europe melts down, money's going to flow into the long end of the yield curve because, well, you know, who's not buying a revamping United States at 4.5%, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so but if he cuts the short end of the yield curve, then you wind up with at the end of the quote unquote bear steepener trade. It's now you don't get a long end sell off. What you get is a long end holds between 4.5 and 5. Might rise another 50 basis points or so, but then the short end of the curve slopes down to 3, I think, by the end of 2025. I think, you know, like we're in such flux that when I look at the way the demand curves for money, the futures curves for money are pricing, I keep saying they're mispriced over and over and over again. I was right about this last year. I said them pricing in 7 rate cuts in 2025 was dumb. We're not going to get 7. We're not going to get 7. We're going to get 3 or 4. I said 3. We might get 4. Okay, I was off by 1. So it was not 7. We're not 3.5% last I checked. But the idea that Powell's going to hold rates higher under a Trump administration cutting spending and cutting regulation. This is the other thing I want to pop into people's heads. There's a lot of hand wringing out there about how we can't cut. There's so much of the budget can't be cut because it's all entitlement spending and defense spending and whatever and an interest rate and interest debt on interest servicing the debt interest payments. So you can't cut $1 out of Medicare because costs have ballooned out of control in the healthcare industry because we're getting every dollar worth of value out of the money we put into Medicare. Correct? You really believe that? You don't think that there's not 50% waste? I'm not talking about people actively defrauding Medicare. I'm talking about the administration of Medicare and the administration of healthcare costs at the hospital level based on all the regulations that the hospitals have to deal with and the doctors have to deal with and the billing and the this and the that and all of that crap. That's what's causing the prices that Medicare has to pay out to the healthcare providers to keep them solvent.
Yeah, they're beholden to the insurance companies.
Well, same thing. Same thing to the insurance companies. Cut the cost of that. It cut the amount of money it costs to take Medicare, provide a healthcare service, cut that by 50%, and now all of a sudden Medicare expenses are cut by 50% because the payouts are lower. Because you introduce, something called the market back to healthcare providing. No, we can't have that. Obama nationalized it. Like everybody who says we have private healthcare is full of shit. This is why it's why I stopped listening to certain people that in 2018, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, there was a cadre of us that were, in the alternative geopolitical space. It'd be like Bernard at Moon of Alabama, Pepe Escobar, the Saker, those guys. And I remember during COVID, Bernard at Moon of Alabama, who's, by the way, former German intelligence, going on this epic rant about how at the beginning of COVID, the United States was fucked because its private healthcare system would not be able to deal with and he was doing this with an assload of Schadenfreude as well, by the way. So the tone was unbelievably dismissive and obnoxious. And so because the private healthcare system in the United States will not be able to deal with this kind of thing, it won't be able to coordinate, it won't be able to blah, blah, blah. Like what the fuck are you talking about, dude? We have a more nationalized healthcare system than you do in Germany. Or do you not know anything about how medical care actually is delivered at the insurance level in America? The only people getting medical care in the United States are the people who are uninsured using concierge service. Everybody else is just feeding the billing machine. I'm on the same boat. I refuse to buy an Obamacare policy. I'm 56 years old. I don't have health insurance. Okay, I refuse. I have a concierge service down in Gainesville that takes care of me and my family. And are we doing a high wire act in case I wind up with cancer tomorrow? Yeah, I am. And at some point, will I get a catastrophic policy? Yeah. But I'm going to wait until this. I'm going to wait till this blows over. There's going to be a moment in the next 2 years where all that shit's going to change. And then you're going to watch me, plunk my dollars down on the table and buy them and buy the freaking policy. Yeah. But there's so much that can actually be cut if you just start to think about the mechanisms by which we spend the money. We spend the money badly. It's like the defense. It's like the Defense Department.
Badly's underselling it. It's
horrendous. Badly is underselling it. I'm New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker. I try to say it. I try to sell badly with emphasis, right? In order to get it across to you. It's horrific. How's that? Is that a better word? Catastrophic.
More descriptive.
Gargantuan.
No, and to your point about Vivek, Elon was even signaling this. I forget who he's being interviewed on or by, but they said you're going to go cut all the spending. It's we're going to cut a bunch of programs. Maybe we'll find out that some programs were actually necessary. We'll bring them back, but it's going to be this trial and error where right. There's a gargantuan problem and a lot needs to be cut. You just start cutting, and things that were actually valuable will prove to be valuable in retrospect, and you'll just bring them back. I don't think that's a terrible strategy.
No, I don't think it's a terrible strategy at all, because the idea that we should absolutely assume that everything, again, assume that everything that we're currently spending on is a net good, right? That by definition, everything we're currently doing is good. This is always the way it's framed. We are doing X because X is good. And that if you take 10% of X away, then we're cutting 10% of good. Bullshit. We know that's a lie, right? So the same thing with the Defense Department. Can we not think that we can't get the same level of service out of the Defense Department for half the money? Literally half the money.
I think 10% of the money.
I'm actually trying to soft sell the 50% cut. I know it's 90%, Marty. I know all of this is bullshit. But what I'm saying is, even when you go to present it to somebody who's unconvinced, go in with 50%. Give them a number that they can wrap their brain around. And then when you say, oh look, we cut 50% of the defense budget, we're getting better weapon systems than we did before. We're getting better value for our money. Maybe we can find another 50%. And we just keep doing the Pareto thing, 50% or 50% or 50% until you get down to a number that doesn't suck. And we can fund with tariffs and excise taxes, which is the way we should be going. And oh, by the way, everybody talking about let's get rid of the income tax. Yes, let's get rid of the income tax. It's expensive. The tax code is horrible. All of that stuff. But we don't replace it with a VAT.
Yeah, explain. I saw you tweeting about this morning. You're pretty passionate
absolutely about it. Do not replace the shit with a VAT. Fuck that. That's friggin' European communism on steroids. Even without an income tax. Even if you repeal the 16th Amendment, which you'll never get through this Congress anyway, so it doesn't friggin' matter. And the last I checked, there's more than 15 states without voter ID. And you need three quarters of the states to sign off on this. And, that'll never happen. So the VAT is terrible. Just in conception, we can, if the government provides a service that, I don't mind paying gasoline excise taxes to the state of Florida. And I pay a lot because they build roads with that. They maintain the roads. The roads are in good shape. They constantly expand the infrastructure with it. They do good things with that money. Is there a better way of doing it? Maybe the hardcore libertarians are right and there's a slightly better way of doing it. Fine. But as of right now, I don't need a state income tax to do it. We run the whole state of Florida with a massive surplus and can send most kids in most A students in Florida coming out of high school on a 3/4 or full ride to a state institution. And we still have a surplus. Billions of dollars from property taxes, excise taxes, and sales tax. That's it. I'm okay with VAT is sold to you as a sales tax. It's not a sales tax because it hits every structure. It hits every stage of the structure of production. So this is a sales tax, by the way, which also bothers the crap out of me. It should only be excise taxes on the finished goods at the point of consumer demand, and everything else is nonsense. We already have a 7% VAT, 6 to 8% VAT, depending on where you live in the country. It's called a sales tax. Same thing. And by the way, it's enough. And it's more than enough. So Sorry, they don't need more than that.
Yeah.
Excise taxes are the way to go. If we have to fund a government, we have to have a government. Again, I'm leaving the hardcore, libertarians in the dust here. The anarcho-libertarians in the dust here. I'm not talking philosophy. I'm talking pragmatism. If we have to have a government, it has to do something. We want it to do things. We should pay court. The court should charge fees for their services. Hey, you go to court and you pay the fees for the judge's time and for the clerk's time and for the bailiff. And okay, fine, we pay some fees. Like you provide a service. You bought a piece of property and you want the government to be the record keeper of who owns what property and all of that. Fine, great. What do the dock stamps cost? Like I have every time I buy a piece of property or sell a piece of property or something like that, I don't do a lot of this in my life, but I've bought a few in my life. I'm like, this is the rarest occasion where I get angry, or even when I buy a car, right? Dock stamps and all that stuff for the registration. What do I give a shit? It's $150. Here you go. Like to register my car, to know that there's a database and an infrastructure in place that if someone steals my car, that I can prove that it's my car because I have the title to it. That's worth $150 to me. And I don't give a shit that the free market can do it for $110. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to get to the point where our society is so efficient and so unregulated that we have that conversation.
Yeah, let's cut another $40 off of this. We're not there yet.
Right. Let's cut that out because that's unnecessary. Wouldn't that be great to live in that world? Peter St. John's this afternoon was literally screaming about, oh, by the way, and lovely man. I love Peter. I did a podcast with him a couple months ago, met him for the first time. He's a lovely man. And saying, we spend $546 billion a year preparing our taxes. And that's just the cost of tax preparation. That's not the unseen cost. Harry Hazlitt, like economics in one lesson, Harry Hazlitt, like saying of all the unseen costs that go into preparing those returns. All of the people, the compliance officers, the tax officers, the accountants at the companies, all the time you have to spend if you're a sole proprietor, having to get all your receipts together at the end of the year, organize them, put them in a spreadsheet, send them over to the accountant to bless. And all they do is they take your numbers anyway, by the way. You have to still do all the legwork. They just package it in such a way as to make sure that the forms are filled out properly, and that they're willing to sign off on the numbers you gave them as being true and correct to the level that you gave them. If you didn't give them the right numbers, your accountant doesn't, their accountant's not on the hook for that. That's just the way it is. And that's a terrible system. That's all hours lost where I or you or anybody else, I could rant into a microphone an extra 2 hours a week if I didn't have to, spend 100 hours preparing my taxes every year, right?
Days lost. Well, imagine running a company on a Bitcoin standard. It's
or how about the local tire guy, right? Or the local restaurateur, right? Having to manage all the receipts and the this and the that and all the accounting and the small books accounting and everything else, just to make sure that he's tracked all of his numbers so that he can pay the government the right amount of money on envelope day to make sure he's not light. And I'm now making a Sopranos reference. That's what this is. And I'll be honest with you, when you think about it, that means that that's time not spent serving food, fixing people's cars, surveying their land,
spending
whatever
time
it
with
is,
your family,
spending time with your family, any of those. But I'm just talking about the rote economic. Just the first order effect is just that's time not spent that I can't spend on my business. And that then winds up being time I take away from my family and take away from my community. And I don't have time on the weekends to go clean up the local park or be this kid's soccer coach or any of the other stuff. We're all spending our extra time preparing our fucking taxes. It's a big broken window fallacy writ large. It's just that simple. And it's disgusting, and it's horrific, and it's dumb, and we should stop fucking doing it.
I completely agree. And I guess that's
it would probably unlock $2 trillion worth of GDP.
Easily.
Because all of these people are not doing what they have a comparative advantage in doing. They are doing work. I'm a bad tax preparer, but I'm an excellent geopolitical analyst. So I don't spend an extra 2 hours a week or whatever it is doing the shit that I'm really good at, getting paid for it. Meanwhile, I'm running around collecting receipts and having to be a bookkeeper. I'm terrible at that. So do you think I'm going to do that well? No. It could take a person with good skills in that 50 hours to prepare my taxes, but it cost me 100. You're not, and it's funny. I went on this rant and some guy came back to me, well, how do you measure that? The unseen stuff. I'm like, you don't, you moron. You can't measure something that didn't happen.
Yeah, you figure out after you get all that out of the way, and then it's like, oh, look at all this economic productivity that.
No, what happens is when you cut the taxes, you find out that when you cut the taxes, when you cut the IRS, when you cut the regulation, all of a sudden, all these projections, well, that's going to cost us 10% of GDP, and it turns out it's 2. Or it's 1, or as opposed to cutting GDP by 10%, GDP expanded by 3%. And all the economists and all the academics are shocked, I say, that this happened. I'm like, yeah, because you're an idiot and you don't understand secondary, tertiary, and quaternary effects. So as I said to this guy back, I'm like, if you're asking me to measure something that didn't happen, you're either A, an idiot, B, a shill for thieves, an enabler of thieves, or C, an academic, or D, all of the above. I happen to go with mostly idiot, but there you go.
Yeah. This rip was also brought to you by our good friends at Salt of the Earth. You got to be hydrating, freaks, and while you're hydrating, you got to be getting your electrolytes. This is the best electrolytes mix that I've ever come into contact with. Pink Himalayan salt with calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, no sugar. It tastes incredible. My favorite is the orange and the pink lemonade. Go to drinksote.com. That's drinksote.com. Use the code TFTC when you make your purchase, and you'll get 15% off. I'm telling you, get on it, freaks. You're going to love this stuff. It seems, again, before we even hit record, I was like, or right when we hit record, how are we getting rugged? But when you factor in everything that's happening right now, Lutnick today, Commerce Secretary, right before we went live, Dr. Oz, head of Medicare, Medicaid. Chris Wright, I mean, this one hits close to home because I've had Chris on the podcast before years ago. And what he did at Liberty Energy, like he's incredibly impressive CEO in the oil and gas sector. And it seems like he's being put in that position to revamp the oil and gas sector. Treasury Secretary, unknown yet, but there's some good names in the mix. Obviously, Tulsi, RFK Jr., Vivek, Elon. Like this does seem like somewhat of a dream team to actually go out and affect this change. And with that in mind, we've talked a lot about the benefits this could have on the U.S. economy. Like how is the European, British side of the fence reacting to this? Like what
badly? They're trying to start World War III.
Yeah, but what like it doesn't like I don't think anybody's buying it. I think everybody saw the announcement and the launches go off. They're like, yeah, fuck you. Let's wait 60 days and get the adults in the room and
get the adults
this will blow over. And then it seems like Trump's also positioning to the East, China specifically, like doesn't want to ban TikTok anymore. Has essentially come out and signaled Taiwan, figure it out yourself. Like we're not gonna lose American lives over Taiwan.
Right.
And then you have
this is a distinctly non-neocon foreign policy that he's setting up, even though there are a lot of the people. Trump was very smart in how he handled the Overton window on this. I don't know if you noticed. The first thing he did was he announced all of the pro-Israeli members of the cabinet in the foreign policy space, and then he allowed that all to percolate for about 48 hours. Then he hit us with Gabbard at DNI, Gaetz for AG, which is by far my favorite.
Well, let's take it before when you finish.
I'm not going to go off on a rant on Matt Gaetz. We'll do that later. But the RFK and all of these other ones, right? All of these other very good appointments. Ben Carson is a Surgeon General, right? But he did that. It's like first it's those guys, the Marco Rubios and even Hegseth. Like I look at some of these people, those appointments all in the foreign policy front outside of the pro-Israel stuff is all about Hegseth is qualified. His resume is stocked to the gills with making the military strong again. It's completely anti-woke in that respect. That's what his job is going to be as SecDef, more than anything else. Tulsi at DNI, Ratcliffe at CIA, that's a powerful combination. Tulsi's going to oversee all of these people. And we're going to have somebody Trump trusts, who is conscientious and wise beyond her years in that position to coordinate and filter for the president and give the president. And so one of the things that's interesting about Trump, I want to, it wasn't, let's listen to somebody talk about this. And I don't know that it was Gabbard. Maybe it was Gabbard. She was talking about this. What Tulsi said was that of the, no, it wasn't. It was somebody who's been in the room with 3 different presidents. And they're like, I've been in the room with Bush, I was in the room with Obama, I was in the room with Trump. And of the 3 of them, Trump was the only one to ask pointed questions, to be engaged, to set the agenda back, to ask for more information. Everybody else knew how to trend, eventually figured out what Bush wanted and then gave him exactly what he wanted. Same thing with Obama, gave him what he wanted. Trump got information, assessed that information, thought about it, asked questions, drilled down, and then demanded more information. And that completely destroys the narrative that Trump is disinterested and he just sits around and watches Fox News and drinks Diet Coke all day and then tweets on his phone, which is bullcrap. So you have, if that's the real Donald Trump in the White House, having Tulsi Gabbard on the other end of that conversation, that's a different world than what we've had. So Gabbard is going to, and the FBI director is also going to be a very, very interesting appointment, but we can't get there until after the inauguration for reasons. Chris Wray doesn't get moved out until after the new administration comes in, apparently, for whatever reason. I think it's the way the appointment works. So she's going to lift the pressure off the junior analysts and all the intelligence services and say, oh no, the president wants this information. And the guys who have been toiling away in the bowels of Quantico, writing reports that they can't send up the chain of command because nobody above them in the chain of command wants to pass that information up because it's contrary to what the president wants to see or what the National Security Council wants to see. So they never get there. And all those guys all the way up the line all want to get their promotions. So their promotions are dependent upon ensuring that the right information makes it up to, that's the way the bureaucracy works. Because there's top-down pressure saying, give us what we ask for, not what we need. What if that changes? And it's not, oh, no, we really want that information now. Now, all of a sudden, those voiceless guys in the bowels of Langley and Quantico are going to have a voice, are going to have a conduit. This is something I've talked to Larry Johnson about because Larry's literally experienced this firsthand. And had a couple of conversations with Larry about this. So I was on his show the other day, and he was on my podcast 6-8 months ago. We're talking about this stuff. So that's a very empowering thing. And I think that's what's important to understand in terms of a foreign policy thing. Trump is going to set the foreign policy here. Okay. I don't worry about Marco Rubio at this point because Marco Rubio is clearly a signal that we're changing our focus from Asia and the Middle East and Europe to Latin America. And that's why Rubio was picked.
What, he said that?
Rubio has extensive, and I don't know. I'm not saying that our policy in Latin America is going to be good. It's going to be the focus.
Cartels, particularly,
maybe. I mean, he speaks the language. He's got a lot of respect within the community. He's got a lot of contacts. I mean, Marco Rubio has a resume. We all like to kind of cartoonify him up as like, Cuban McCain, but he's not. Okay. He's not good. I mean, but it's better. I would actually prefer him as Secretary of State because now he has to perform and he can be fired. Couldn't be fired as senator. And now we get to filter somebody into, the other Florida Senate seat who we can trust. That's not squishy. That doesn't have what I like to call a manila envelope quotient, an MEQ, that's, off the charts. Because little Marco has a big manila envelope pile on his desk of who owns him. So remove him from the Senate, where his vote can be, manipulated, and put him in Secretary of State under a direct chain of command from Trump to him, and with getting information from Gabbard, and Gabbard working against anything he tries to insert into the process. That, you know what I mean? Like she can now temper Foggy Bottom. And
do you think Gabbard's simply going to be a conduit filter for information, or do you think structural change will come?
Oh, I think it's a structural change, but DNI is not really a structural position. It's really a traffic cop amongst all the intelligence agencies. It's also only a 20-year-old position. I mean, we only created that position after 9/11 to coordinate all the different. It's not like it's one of these things like the Department of Education. Like, oh, we've always had a Department of Education. No, we didn't. It was created during the Carter administration. Like fuck off. The same thing with Homeland Security. It's another one of these agencies that does nothing and costs us a lot of money, or does very little for the amount of money. For the cost benefit analysis, at best, what I'll say is the cost benefit analysis on DHS is very poor. Well, let's just put it that way.
Well, this gets back to
the TSA, obviously.
Well, when it comes to like structural reform, particularly the intelligence and the DOJ, I guess that comes back to Gaetz, which
bingo,
where you let the pit bull out.
Yeah, you want the pit bull there. Like, Matt Gaetz, Elon Musk came out with a brilliant tweet about Matt Gaetz today. I don't know if you saw it or not.
I don't think I did.
He said Matt Gaetz has 3 qualities that make him the most qualified person for being attorney general. I don't remember what those 3 things are. So basically, he's not corrupt. He's a bull. He's an absolute bulldog, and he won't let anything go. And he's tenacious as hell, and he's uncompromising. Now, there was something else. So Elon had 3 points. It's a famous tweet. It's got 4. It's typically Elon tweet. It's like, it's got 6-8 million views already. He said it makes him supremely qualified to be attorney general. Now, Matt Gaetz becomes a very interesting political football because, again, we're now deep into the bowels of Florida politics. Dexter White and I did an episode of my podcast last week going over a lot of this in detail because, we're 2 Floridians and Dexter has a nearly encyclopedic knowledge of Florida politics going back for most of our lives because he's a native Floridian and, was always politically much more astute when we were younger than, when I had hair. So, he's always known this stuff. So this for him is where his specific knowledge is really good. His argument is, okay, if the Senate stands their ground on Gaetz and doesn't allow him to be AG, then with Rubio at state, then DeSantis just turns around and appoints Gaetz as Rubio's replacement in the Senate. That's still a win because now we replaced Marco Rubio with Matt Gaetz, one less squishy Republican, one rabid Republican or Trumper in the Senate, representing one of the most important states in the union, the 3rd most important state in the union. And then the AG position, Dexter's argument would be then he turns around and says, okay, not Ron DeSantis because there's too much bad blood between them anyway. And DeSantis' job here in Florida isn't finished. It's Ashley Moody, the current Florida Attorney General under DeSantis. And she's a bulldog as well. And you put her in, and then maybe there's a quid pro quo in 26 or 27, at the midterms where you do a midterm reshuffling of the cabinet, and maybe by then DeSantis and Trump have buried the hatchet or whatever, and then DeSantis could slot in as AG, and that would be excellent. You need these people to come in and just rattle everyone's cages. Because if in total, if you look at this cabinet is really designed to take on the domestic corruption and root it out and start reversing the process. It's really not about setting up fights with the legislature, which are going to fight Trump tooth and claw anyway, because the Democrats are still cheating to create a less durable advantage in both houses of the legislature. So the thing to do is to not worry about that. Just say, pass a goddamn budget and leave me alone and fight amongst yourselves. I don't care. And then this cabinet gets all the wins that the people want, which then paves the way for a midterm sweep, right? McConnell retires. Lindsey Graham is either primaried out or removed, right? Because he's up in 27 as well. So, and a variety of others. Murkowski, I haven't checked to see if Murkowski is up in 27 or not. I don't know. Murkowski, Collins, the typical ones. Murkowski, Collins, Graham, and that crew. You get rid of all of that, and McConnell. You get rid of them, and then Thune, right? A Senate Majority Leader. I think they're all up in 27. That's a lot of seats. It's a lot of changeover, and you could force a lot of retirements too. You could force a lot of people to just be given the option of the gold watch and not jail. And I think a lot of people are going to be doing that calculus once the cabinet is set. And Trump can use recess appointments if he wants. McConnell's not going to want to give it to him. Tough shit. Or I'm going to read you something about the vacancy clause. Again, this is why I love my friend Dexter White. He is so good. Let me find this real quick. We've been going back and forth about, like, I have to really scroll back through my text because it's been that heavy a day. But let's talk about.
Yeah, because this is something that came up within the last week, and it's been used once before. Is that correct?
Yeah, the vacancies clause, yes. Did I miss it? Was it already in here from last night? Oh, God. So many texts today. Oh, if you read Article 2, Section 3 carefully, it is clear that the president has the power to adjourn Congress to such time as he shall think proper, which ultimately means, that he can appoint. Then he goes, and then there's the Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998. So they can use, and this is going to factor into not only the Gaetz appointment, where it will be likely now that he is appointed, but it's going to be how Trump puts people where he wants by using the Vacancies Act of 1998. It's their rules.
And would this have to happen after the inauguration? Like, you can't do this.
No, this would happen during the recess. He can just adjourn Congress and then use the Vacancies Act to push people into position. And then he can not re-adjourn Congress until such time as he's comfortable with what he wants. He does not have to re-adjourn Congress.
Yeah, I can only imagine the screeching from the mainstream corporate press about the dictatorship.
Oh my God! I'm now calling them the undead press. By the way, not even the legacy press they're the undead press. They really are being sold off for parts. I was wondering the other day whether or not if I found a spare tenner under the couch, I can make a bid for MSNBC when they put it up for sale.
Well, I mean,
I was chatting with. What's that?
I mean, with RFK getting in, like, if we do the one thing that 98% of other countries do, which is not allow the pharma companies to advertise, that's a big hit.
It's a big hit. Big hit. I love the fact that now we got Democrats out there like making a big stink on TikTok by that they're going to drink seed oils because they're so healthy. I'm like, great. Shit yourself to death. I just make sure you film that one too. Okay.
Where are the landmines here? Where does this get held up? Like, obviously we talked about World War III. Is that the last card in the hand that they can pull?
I think that, threatening the world with nuclear war, that's kind of, once you go nuclear, you've got nothing else you can threaten people with, right? So I don't know. There are landmines here, but again, as you and I've talked about over the last 2 years, Wall Street and there's a sovereignty swing, obviously, at the DOD. Everybody sees it now, right? Everybody sees it. they're clearly in charge. They're clearly setting the agenda. Because if not, we would have already gone off half-cocked like Rambo without a jockstrap. Like we would have. But we didn't. We haven't. And so, and the Russians haven't gone off half-cocked, you know, and this just feels like it's one of those things where, you know, we are right to distrust the calm and the quiet. I saw John Brennan up on MSNBC the other day, so he poked his head out, thinking that he's got something to play. The landmines here, I think, are going to be, they're going to try for civil war still as well. Like, they're still counting ballots in all these swing states. They're trying to, you know, run with the meme that Trump didn't get 50% of the vote and therefore he's a minority president and that he's not a legitimate president. This is to give the shit libs the dopamine hit that there's still a chance that they're going to become the resistance and all of that. Gavin Newsom started floating the idea of California seceding, and he quickly backed down on that. Like, they keep playing these cards and they keep landing like a Led Zeppelin. You know what I mean? And which is how Zeppelin got its name. Do you know that story?
Yeah.
So, hey man, not everybody does. It's a great story. So, they keep landing badly. Like, no one's listening to it. No one cares. Everybody's like, Trump's the president. Live with it and move on. Just like you told us to live with it and move on last year, 4 years ago. But what he's doing here, what he's setting up now, and what is incredibly important is that we get some kind of national election reform for national elections. But if you look, and I'll tell you, Trump and company are being very smart about what stories they are planting into the zeitgeist. The fact that we can't recall senators. Everybody's like, why can't we recall these shitbag senators? Well, there's this thing called the 17th Amendment, where the state legislature, where we took the power away from the state legislatures to appoint senators and gave it to the people as to make it yet another big friggin' house of the people. Now, that was a very unbalancing thing to our government. Our government was designed around a different structure. The states had representatives in the Senate. The people had their representatives in the House of Representatives. The executive branch, so they had the bicameral legislature with two different groups being represented. We don't have that. We have the senators running in statewide elections who now represent corporate lobbyists and foreign actors because they're the ones that pay, as opposed to the state legislators. So the state legislatures, which would look at this stuff and go, you're not working in our best interest. You're going home and you get to manage a Dairy Queen, you know, in Destin. Sorry, you're not senator anymore.
Yeah,
that's it. It's over.
That seems way more efficient. I never knew that about the 17th Amendment.
Yeah, 17th Amendment killed. The 17th Amendment is part of that, what I call so if we had the original American Revolution, then the second one was the failed second American Revolution. Well, I would argue it could actually, depending on whether or not you think the Union should have won or the South was right, it's still the second American Revolution. The third was 1913. Income tax, direct election of senators, Federal Reserve Act. And then the fourth one was it 2 weeks ago? Or was it 2016 when 2017 when Trump nominated Powell and we started the monetary independence of the United States, which we'd never had before.
Yeah. Yeah, their bullshit is falling on deaf ears. I mean, just look at, I don't know if you watched the UFC fights on Friday, but it wasn't only, John Jones is the one getting all the clicks on Twitter, but every fighter, every American fighter, even if they lost, went up to him, shook his hand.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't watch it. I didn't watch the fights. One of my patrons who I play World of Warcraft with, he spent the evening watching the fights with his young son, and and he came back in later on. I don't generally watch the fights anymore, and I wasn't going to watch anything on Netflix anyway because I won't give them money. I have more of a hate on for Netflix.
That's I didn't watch that fight. I'm talking about the UFC fights. That was
oh yeah, I don't watch UFC on a regular basis anymore. Actually, I don't even watch any sports, to be honest, anymore. I don't even watch hockey. I don't even watch the Stanley Cup anymore. Like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, when I want downtime, like I guess, especially when I watch hockey, like I get so emotionally invested in it. Like I do geopolitics and markets and everything else. I mean, I'm just as friggin' rabid watching the fucking NHL than I am when I do this shit. And when I jack out of this world, Marty, I don't smoke these like with a death grip. I'm like, oh God, thank God. They're like, I'm just going to sit and relax for a little while. Well, and now that and before then I would say it was even worse. I would sit down to relax and watch television. And of course I would watch only shit that was like filling my brain with stories that I could use to work. I was still working. Like when I play World of Warcraft, I am not working. I am killing pixels for love and money. And that's all I'm doing. I'm hanging out with my daughter and a couple of my patrons and a couple of her friends, and we're running 5-mans and we're face rolling a whole bunch of shitty dungeons and we're having a blast.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, the point, like, sports is a good lens into where the zeitgeist is. And I think the zeitgeist, combination of what you're seeing out of like the sports world, where just the athletes feeling emboldened to publicly support Trump. And I tweeted this out last week, but the fact that he put Tulsi and RFK in, I think that's going to go a long way. Going back to your point about like civil war, like there were those, whether you want to call them right-wing hippies or essentially anti-war, health-conscious liberals who came over to the Trump ticket because of Tulsi and RFK specifically. Like they're going to go to bat for him. Like
yeah, they are. And I'll tell you something else that's happening. I've told the story before, but I have a friend down in Gainesville, and one of the things that he does to make ends meet is he substitute teaches in the Alachua County school system. And he's like, dude, all the kids are coming to school wearing MAGA hats after the election. Like it's like the veil was lifted, and into Alachua County school system, which is as fucking blue a county as you have in Florida. Like it gets bluer every year, every election. We're 62-38 now. And this last, the 62, 63, 30, 37 or whatever. It's almost as blue as Broward. Broward is, percentage-wise, I think only Tallahassee, only Leon County is worse, right? But populationally, obviously, the biggest concentration of libs in Florida is still Broward County by population. It's like 1.8 million people versus a couple $100,000 for Alachua County. But yeah, I mean, but the kids are walking around the Alachua County schools wearing MAGA hats.
It feels, I mean, again, going back to the zeitgeist, like it feels like a weight has been lifted off of all the sensible people in the country, and they see a path forward towards relative freedom, the ability to interact throughout the, like there's a true optimism, like, holy shit, we can have another
we did it.
Renaissance here.
We have an opportunity here. This is the boat heard around the world. I mean, it caused the collapse of the German government, dude. It's going to have, the world was asking us to lead. I really believe that. It was asking the American people to lead. Like, we can't do this without your help. The Russians have led on their corner of the world to, geopolitically to push back against the hegemon, which was the right thing for them to do, to start breaking apart all these old narratives and all these old relationships and force them into the open for people to have to defend. Right. And that's really what Putin's done. Brexit, was the first state of it, was the first sign of it. Then Trump's election in 2016. Obviously, the empire struck back. I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars guy, but I'm not crazy about this whole Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Return to the Jedi, right? I'm not a big fan of that, but it's cute. Or the Return to the King, even if you want to use the Two Towers reference, a Tolkien reference, right? The point being is that things had progressed to the point where they were really untenable for a lot of people, and for us to deliver this result to the world and say, look, we're going to fix our house. And by us fixing our house and by us pulling back on the pressure that we're exerting on the rest of the world. That's going to give you an opportunity to rise up and do the things, put pressure from the top, from the bottom up where you are. And, I love the reactions that I'm seeing out of the German government. We're going to have to go for snap elections. We're going to ban AFD, and not allow, and for what? For a couple of some trumped up bullshit about 3 guys from Saxony who were separatists, like we're all feds anyway. Like, are you kidding me? It's like the 12 neo-Nazi spooks that were marching through Columbus, Ohio the other day. I'm like, really? You think those guys are real? You think, okay, I mean, give me a break. Like, it's so pathetic at this point.
Well,
this shit doesn't play.
You see it in the UK too with this farmer wealth tax that they just tried to or they're trying to levy. Yeah. And people are standing up. It feels like from afar, just from the English people that I follow on Twitter, like they're fed up and they seem emboldened by what's happened here. They're like, look what they're doing in the U.S. And for the first time.
In the same way that we were emboldened when Brexit went through. I mean, I got to tell you, I think Brexit had a huge effect on the election in 2016. I think, I think Nigel Farage was a force for Trump. Like, people on the non-communist side of the aisle, looked at Brexit and went, yeah, the EU sucks. Like, and that's that. And, and the idea that we, that all the uneducated, mouth breathers voted for Trump and all the wise and insouciant, college graduates voted for Kamala Harris, that shit does not play. Like, the way you turn that around and the way people are turning around is going, oh, really? Well, if only college graduates voted, the country would have went blue. Yeah. Well, what that's telling me is that we definitely need to get rid of the Department of Education.
Afuera, get it out of here.
Oh, really? Okay, that's all that's telling me. Like, I don't know what it tells you, but that's what it tells me. And again, it's agree and amplify at a certain level. This is what you have to do with people, and and I'm okay with all. Obviously, I'm okay with that. That's my whole shtick. Is like, figure out the way to, in my own way. I'm not a particularly great meme lord, but when I see a great meme, I come up with some every once in a while, but the true meme lords out there are just, I mean, they're next level, dude. Yeah. I mean, they really are. And they have done such great work to, as Dave Collin put it the other day to us, to keep our spirits up during the dark times. They were the guys in the foxhole saying, nope, we're going to get through this. Nope. Keep laughing at them. Nope, we're okay. We're going to get through this. The bombs are going to stop falling at some point, and we're going to be okay. Like, they kept morale up. They were the chaplains, or whatever whatever role you want to put them in the metaphor. Doesn't matter. I think that it was a valuable service that they performed, along with the people like Scott Pressler going out and like just doing good old fashioned grassroots, signing people up and getting them to the ballot box. That shit wins. And it's awesome to see. It's awesome to see people of high conscientiousness. And we're not, these meme lords are driven by conscientiousness, the big 5 pillars of personality. Like, they may all be antisocial, but they're also conscientious. Yeah. And that's how they operate. That's how those two pillars, like, express themselves.
Shout out to the 4chan meme lord priest. I mean, they got Trump in 2016. And this is another thing too, to embolden. I'm sure there's people on the fence that intuitively feel that this is a good outcome for the country. Right. And then going back to the meme lords, and while we're having this discussion, it's just Kamala's already out of the discussion. I haven't heard anybody say her name in 2 weeks. Now they're going back to Joe at press conferences. Like, Kamala will be forgotten by New Year's Eve. And what does that say to you? Trump won 2016, lost 2020, and is more popular than ever now. Like, what do the people actually want? And like, do you think, could you foresee a resurgent in fervor around Kamala happening at any point in the future?
No, not at all. I mean, dude, she's not even young and hot anymore, right? I mean, she's not, I mean, that'd be the only people who would be excited to see her at this point. I'll be honest with you. Somebody said it to me the other day. They said, dude, she looked relieved at her concession.
No, you get and then you get the picture of her with her sister or whatever and her nieces with a fat glass of white wine. I was honestly happy for her. It's like, you look like you did not want to go through
you
that.
look relieved. Like, this is over now. This is over. And, look, and maybe, just maybe, this was the thing for, again, it's like everything else. When you find out who people really are when they, when they're given the opportunity to, utilize power. When you look at Kamala Harris, I hate to tell you, but, she wanted the brass ring or the gold ring. She wanted it. She can get it, and now she can move on with her life. People like Tulsi Gabbard, on the other hand, were offered all the power in the world. Unearned. She just ticked all the boxes, and she walked away from power multiple times. And that's powerful. And that story's powerful. And the level of authenticity on display there, if you still think that there's something, something to that picture of her on the, WEF Young Leaders website, sorry, dudes, you're missing it. That's a cope. Like, the woman is who she is. And that's the face of the future. She, J.D. Vance, who goes out there with an unbelievable amount of self-effacement. Like, this is one thing that has really impressed me about Vance. I'm not sure I'm sold on Vance's in every way, right? I'm going to be frank and honest. But the one thing I really like about Vance is that he's self-effacing. He looks at himself and goes, yeah, I got a lot of faults. Yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Yeah, I'm not, I'm not this, I'm not that. These people are not going out there. Him, RFK, Tulsi, other people, Trump. They're not going out there with the typical political operative training, media training, the typical media training. And I've gotten a little of this as a newsletter editor at Newsmax. One of the first things I learned, I was told to do, and this is the way you write a newsletter. You lead, and you never show weakness. And when you make a mistake, you just say, I made a mistake, we're moving on. And this is the way, politicians are trained to act. They're trained to act like, never show weakness. You're in charge. You're competent. Blah, 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 blah. You lead. Even if you're not, even if you're in a state of flux. It's in that respect, it's almost kind of a fake it till you make it kind of thing. That's not really what they were saying, but it was. This is the way you have to present yourself if you want to retain your. This is how this thing is done. I'm like, yeah, I don't buy that. I'm going to hedge my position. I'm going to throw out thought. I'm going to throw out thought experiments. And I ran into a lot of trouble with my first editor over at Newsmax over this because she didn't like the tone. And I'm like, oh, well, I like her personally, and she did a fine job of editing the newsletter, and we're still friends, but I couldn't work with her because she had a conception of what I was supposed to do, or how this was supposed to be written, and what my image was supposed to be to manage. And we have a lot of, and all of our politicians do this, and all of our CEOs do this, and and the media presenters and everybody, they do this, and they don't come across as human. Because they never show weakness. And that's a playground and a recipe for people who hate to show weakness, to feed their narcissism, and then use it strategically. And what we're seeing with this group of people that's coming in, they're like, no, we're all flawed. Terminally flawed. We're going to do our best. But, give us a chance. We're going to try and do the right thing. As Vivek was saying, like, we're going to cut, I think it was, you just said, we're going to cut a whole bunch of stuff. And if it turns out that thing that we cut turns out to be vital, we'll put it back in. Like, no blame, no shame. Like, this is, we're all flying by the seat of our pants here. Nobody's perfect. So don't, and as long as you don't present yourself as perfect, then, people will give you a lot of leeway.
Yeah, and
because it comes across as real and authentic.
Yeah, and this is shining through in layers, like not only the individuals, but the way in which they won the election, like going the podcast route and embracing the long format medium and being vulnerable and having conversations with people outside the mainstream media who approach conversations very differently and will take you to areas that you're not used to, but you're forced to act
with.
You're forced to act authentically, and that's what is connecting with people is authenticity. We live in an age of authenticity because we're swimming in information, and we
live in an age screaming for authenticity and an absolute sea of smarm. This is literally what I wrote in one of the first blogs I ever posted on my website. It's called The Authenticity Gap. And I refer back to it over and over and over again because it's how I knew. And it was a crib of an editorial I wrote for my newsletter at Newsmax at the time in 2016. So I wrote this thing in middle of 2017. So 2016, during the election campaign, I said, Trump is going to win the election because he's appealing to the millennial crowd that is dying for authenticity. Even though they don't know what authenticity may be, but their addiction to craft cocktails and farm to table food choices and manscaping and all of this stuff and flannel shirts and all the rest of it, all that lumberjack, remember a whole thing. And if you look at and it gave me a lot of hope. I said, those guys are going to break for Trump because that's what they want, because they've been living in the sea of smarm of these fucking mendacious liars for so long. They're like, no, we just want somebody real. We don't even give a shit if he's competent. We just want to know that this is who you actually are. And I'm telling you, paying forward here, it's so very obvious. And that's why I do podcasts with people I know are authentic, or I go back on their show after I've had a long conversation with them that I know are authentic. So I love hanging out with you. I know you're authentic. I know this is the real deal. And that's why the conversations are good, and that's why podcasting is the future of media. It's why the undead media hasn't gotten it yet. It's why Chris Wallace will never, put out a good podcast. He may put out a successful podcast because of his name for a brief period of time, but it won't be an authentic podcast. Notice how Megyn Kelly went from Megyn Kelly of NBC News with that persona. Go back and watch Megyn Kelly at the first debate with Trump when she was the moderator. Go watch those clips. Now watch Megyn Kelly today. Completely. That's the real Megyn Kelly that we see today. That one was a construction of media.
That's funny.
That was an actress.
There was a quote, or not a quote, a clip of Morning Joe from MSNBC, and they literally had a panel of, I think Micah and Joe Scarborough might have been the youngest people on the panel, talking about the problem of social media and podcasting. Right. All the millennials are doing these 20-second clips, and they're not seeing our stuff. And it's like, we are seeing your stuff. It's just coming in on clips on Twitter, and we're making fun of you. And like, even they don't even understand. Like, they're mischaracterizing it. They think we're consuming our information in 20-second clips. It certainly happened to an extent, but most of the deep information sort of filtering that people my age are doing is via podcast.
Yeah. I mean, people have a lot of time in their car. It's why Rush Limbaugh. It's again. Let's go back to AM radio. Why was Rush Limbaugh so successful? Why did he carve out? Why was he such a pioneer? Let's give it up to Al Rushbaugh. I mean, I wasn't Rush's biggest fan as what he talked about on a regular basis, but what Rush represented was immense. He understood that there was an immense gap to be filled. There's a unique selling proposition in AM radio, and he revitalized the entire industry himself and provided a counterpoint to all the droning on that we saw everywhere else. And got news for you, folks. It's continue to pay dividends, and as the technology, change that so that we can do effectively what used to be AM radio, and now we can do it in whatever format we want. And well, necessarily not any format we want, but we can do it now with our own personal takes. And people have the time, where they're stuck in their cars for an hour and a half because of this terrible city planning that leaves people stranded on these hour and a half commutes or wherever. They got big blocks of time to zone out, not talk to the person next to them on the train, or, they're stuck in their car by themselves. They stick on a podcast and they get an hour or an hour and a half of really good information. I have my own version of that pre quote unquote podcasting days. But when I was working in South Florida away from home and I had to commute back and forth to my life up here in North Florida on the weekends, it was a 3.5 hour trip. What did I do? I loaded up my phone with all the gold, early gold, now we would call them podcasts, but all the old shows like Jim Popava's show and this one show and that one, Al Corlin and all those guys. And hours upon hours upon hours of lectures from the Mises Institute. I mean, hundreds of hours, including listening to Human Action and Man Economy Estate and all of that stuff, right? I listened to them all. I'm in a car for 3.5 hours. When I wasn't talking to my friend on the phone about what raid we were going to run in World of Warcraft, when I got back to Stewart on Sunday afternoon, like I was listening to these things. I was doing this 5-7 hours a week. For 5 years. And then in my office, and then in my lab, while I was working and running experiments, this shit was on autoplay all day long. I literally was doing this stuff back into, at the beginning of YouTube. I remember when Stefan Molyneux first started his YouTube channel because he stopped writing for LRC, Lou Rockwell, and he started doing YouTube. I remember when he started.
Yeah,
I was there. I heard it. Yeah.
And as you're describing, I mean, it makes that we've had going back to AM radio, Rush Limbaugh, very early days, like iPod, RSS, like we're like a generation into this format. And
yeah,
maybe this election is a signal that like the time dilation between the introduction of the format and the overall effect it could have on society is being played out right now. We had flashes of it in 2016, and now, I mean, this is the first election where, I mean, podcasts were a medium that politicians actually realized that they had to leverage.
And guess who was the first one to leverage it as a campaign strategy? RFK.
Yeah.
He literally went out and said, I'm going to do every podcast I can.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell the people who I am and warts and all. And others had, and other people like Gabbard was very smart in, between 2020 and 2024, she embraced it. She made herself available. She didn't have anything else. I mean, what was she really doing? Right. She was no longer a congresswoman. She got the commentator gig here and there on Fox News, but what did she do? She went on Joe Rogan 6 times or 3 or 4 times, whatever it was, built up a relationship with him, built up a relationship with this one, to the point where when Barry Weiss tries to smear Tulsi Gabbard as a Russian asset, Joe just like stops her dead cold, very kindly, I might add. But it was the kindest, gentlest body slam UFC style that I've ever seen. And it was gorgeous is what it was.
And it's funny, Barry Weiss couldn't get herself out of the New York Times mindset of, I'm just going to believe what everybody says. And he's like, no, right. You may want to look into that.
Maybe you should, I'm going to push back on that, and she thought she was in a safe place going on Joe Rogan, because Rogan's he's not really a confrontational guy.
Then right? She hears Jamie pull it up, and she's like, "Oh shit,
I'm fucked."
Jamie fact checker. Yeah, I'm very optimistic right now. I came into this conversation expecting to hear where we're going to get rugged potentially, but
nah. Well, not now. I mean, I can see where the pitfalls are, but I've been watching this play out, and for the last 2 weeks, it's been a really weird feeling. I hoped it would happen the way it's happened, right? You had to go into it with an immense amount of skepticism. I won't lie to you. I put at least 5 pounds on stress eating leading up to this thing. And I've already in 2 weeks taken it mostly back.
I was going to say, you look great.
Yeah, well, I do now, but like 3 weeks ago, I looked like shit. I just immediately went on a freaking carnivore diet for a week and cut everything out. And I'm not stress eating it. I'm not running out to the convenience store and buying a bag of pretzels and a Diet Coke at 2:00 in the morning. Okay. Which is what I was doing. And then not going to bed until 4:30 and getting up at 7. This is what my life was like for like the month up until the election. I couldn't function. I get one sleep cycle a night. My sleep cycle is about 2 hours and 45 minutes. So if I do 2.5, so if I do 2 sleep cycles, about 5.5 hours, I'm usually good. Right. Dude, it was terrible. And I knew I was doing it to myself. And you know what? I was like, I'm not, if she fucking wins, it's not going to matter. I'm now going to have to make really, really significant changes to my lifestyle, because let's not kid ourselves. What was being set up for us was, hey, everybody, we've now made it okay for you to complain about the Jews in Israel and the this and the that. Here's the pressure release valve. You got a year to get it out of your system while we catalog all of you people, because you're all going to get deplatformed. You're all going to get unpersoned. You're all going to get sent to digital Guantanamo, and your lives are going to be over. They were planning this. The threats were all right there in front of us, and we could all see it. And no matter how much you try and say, well, maybe the angel of death will pass over my door, to really extend that metaphor, you didn't know. And I had this, I've had a lot of brushes with success in my life up until this point. And every time I've gotten close to it, something's taken it away, either my own self-sabotage or not reading the tea leaves right and running into coffin corner, metaphorically speaking, or whatever. And this was setting up to feel exactly the same way. So part of what you probably were getting off of me in the things we did over the summer was part of that. I know that's what was going on with me. I don't know about you, but that's clearly what was happening.
The last 2 times you were on, you were tired, very tired.
Yeah, I really was. And today I feel just, a weight was lifted on that evening. We were doing a Twitter Spaces live blogging the late night from we were on from 11 or from 10 to 12:30 or whatever. And it felt an awful lot like the live stream I did on the night of 2020. And I was, hanging out with my patrons then. And, we were there and we were high-fiving. This thing looks like it's in the bag. I'm getting drunk. Everything's good. And then I kick off about 11:30 and I go to watch the election results. And about 2 a.m., I see the steal happen. And I went, and I texted Dexter White and I said, they're going to steal this thing. This is how they're going to do it. At best, he's going to get 269. He's going to lose 271 to 269. And his reply to me at 2:30 in the morning was, Civil War it is then. Yeah, that's where we've been for the last 4 years. So strategically, we've had to manage that stress level and that mindset for the last 4 years. And yeah, it's been a lot. But, I don't know, maybe and I'll tell you, coming into June of 2021 and that fateful FOMC meeting, that for me really does mark the change of, the beginning of this counter revolution that we've kind of been chronicling. That was the first ray of hope I'd had in 9 months. And even the midterm elections weren't much of a kick in the teeth, to be honest with you, because by that point, became pretty obvious to me that there was something else running. It was a counter current running that was powerful enough, with the right people having the right amount of power, counterbalancing, countervailing power to the ones that we were fighting. And then I watched Omicron fail, and I watched this fail. I made the call at some point in 2020 when Omicron happened, and they couldn't turn that into they couldn't turn it into a second round of lockdowns. So we are at peak Davos. We're done. It's now, they're just fighting rearguard actions. And now let's see how they're going to destroy it. Let's see how they're going to counter move us down to the point where when they threaten us with nuclear war. And when Trump lived, everything changed. And then it was just a matter of, okay, are they going to take this thing to AIDA, and are the grown-ups actually in charge or not? And I couldn't answer that question until after the election. And once the election happened, I'm like, nope, we're good. And I'm like, and I didn't walk around. Interestingly enough, like when Trump won in 2016, I walked around the house for 2 weeks. I shit you not, for 2 weeks, randomly cackling with glee. I'd be walking, I'd get up from my computer. I start to walk over to the kitchen to go get a cup of coffee. And then halfway there, I just start cackling, like maniacally, like the fucking Joker, right? This time,
It's
none
relief.
of that. It was just, okay, then we have work to do. And I told my patrons the morning after I do a market report on Wednesdays. That morning, I said, "This is great." I played them a Gaelic Storm song to start the day. Another Day Above the Roses, which you haven't listened to that song with the lyric sheet. It's brilliant. It's a perfect way to go about all of this stuff. And then did the market report, and I got done and went, "That was fun. Tomorrow we get back to work."
I mean, that's honestly the most, maybe we have different contexts of getting back to work, but for like us in the Bitcoin space, like it feels like we've got room to breathe. And like, I'm infinitely excited at the prospect of just being able to work and get shit done. Where if it went the other way, similar thoughts, like we've got to reshuffle the deck and figure out what we're doing.
How we're gonna make this work? Because I'll be honest with you. In my part of the space, I would really seriously have to think about being unpersoned, debanked, and all the rest of it, right? Okay, if that's the case, that's the case. My wife and I looked at each other and went, that's what happens. That's what happens. We've weathered worse in the past. And they can take everything away from us. They can't take each other. They can't take each other from us. So, okay. And we'll figure it out. And if we have to live out of our car, we'll live out of our car. Yeah. Like, whatever happens. Like, do your worst. You can't take your last. It's that scene from V for Vendetta, right? Where he's torturing her and she's like reading the screen, reading the beautiful story about the actress Valerie. On toilet paper, and it's about that last inch. If they're never going to take that last inch from you, they don't have you. They can take your body. They can corrupt your mind, but if they can't take your fucking soul, fuck you. You don't have me. And they never had me. And those are the guys they were going to take out. So, and maybe that's egotistical or solipsistic on my part. Maybe it's paranoid. I don't know. But it's the way you have to feel and have to make your peace with that if you're going to continue to do what you do. Because if not, then you're not capable of leading. And you're not capable of being a resource for everybody else. Like one of the things I find really interesting, we brought up the farmers thing earlier. This is one of those moments. Jeremy Clarkson, whether he intended to or not, has become a spokesperson for the farmers worldwide. Clarkson's Farm, if you have not watched it, shut up. Don't stop listening to me. Go fucking watch Clarkson's Farm because it's brilliant. But Jeremy was like, well, they're going to have this big thing. He's like, I can't go. I'm not a real farmer. And they're like, Jeremy, you are the spokesperson for all of us. We need you there. It's time for you to stand up and be a man and not a 9-year-old boy. You've made an entire trade and millions of dollars in being a 9-year-old boy and championing these causes and the internal combustion engine, motoring, and now farming. Great. But now this is your moment where you got to get in that fucking Lamborghini and lead that big old Lamborghini tractor that he bought, which is terrible, and drive that fucking thing down to London, pot belly and all, and do the thing. And I'll bet you dollars to dollars if you've watched Clarkson's Farm, his significant other, his girlfriend Lisa, who's Irish, by the way. If you have not watched the show, she's great. I'm like, damn well that she read him the goddamn Riot Act. And so Clarkson manned up, did the thing. That's what you need.
Yeah,
doesn't matter. You can be a bad man your entire life. You can be, a guy grifting off the Zeitgeist and everything else. But if this matters to you now, if you truly love what you do now, then that's the moment where you have to stand up and go, you know what? Shoot me. What are you going to do? Shoot me. Fuck you. You can't have me.
We talked about this in the episode right after the assassination attempt too, but it's like, I think there's some divine intervention in all these things, and sometimes God picks conduits who are rough around the edges and you wouldn't expect. Trump, Clarkson, fitting archetypes.
One of the most powerful stories, one of the most powerful biblical stories is that God speaks through the worst of us, right? Mm-hmm. Capital G-O-D, lowercase G-O-D, doesn't matter. Metaphorically speaking, this is the story of, St. Christopher, shepherding. This is the story of St. Christopher. This is Thomas Covenant, Stephen Donaldson, great fantasy story. This is literally the worst of human being you can imagine, having to man up and stand up against evil for something he doesn't even want to believe in, right? That story is very powerful, and it's very important, and it's why that archetype of that story is very, very powerful. And Batman is also built off of that archetype, right? So the gargoyle that stands outside the cathedral to guard it, but can never enter it, right? It's very powerful, and maybe we all have a little bit of that in us, and that's what we have to reconcile within ourselves. I'm all in, dudes. This is about making the world a better fucking place. This is about leaving this fucking place better off for my daughter and for yours and everybody else than anything else. The rest of it does not fucking matter. And we have to pay this forward. The kids went along with this. Did you see the demographic breakdown of the vote?
Yep. When
I finally looked at it, I nearly cried. Because I realized that the 18 to 29-year-olds nearly broke for Trump. Like, a lot was made that this is the Gen X. The Gen X finally came up and made themselves account. This is the Gen X election and everything else. And I've been trying to meme we're the greatest generation kind of thing. Just to stick it, just to stick it to the mythology of World War II. But this is that moment. But we wouldn't have done it without them. And so we owe it to them to tear down this rotten edifice, replace parts of it with nothing, reform what's usable, and move forward. And is it going to be perfect? No. Is it going to be better? Yes. But it's not going to be up to us to make it that, it's Pareto, guys. We're going to get 80% of the good stuff done. That 20%, we'll leave that for the next cycle of humanity. And then the next cycle, and the next cycle, and the next cycle. And that's the way we have to approach this.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm, again, extremely optimistic. I think we're going to do it. I think if don't get complacent. We got, Tom said, we got work to do. We got to get out there and do it.
Fuckload of work to do. And I'm excited to actually watch it happen and chronicle the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. And, and by the grace of my patrons, I will be given that opportunity.
Yeah.
Or not, depending on how I handle it. That's the way we all have to look at it. So it doesn't matter if you're building a business or you're doing what I'm doing, or everybody's got, well, obviously what I'm doing is a business, but but the point, and this is what we have to do, but it's doable. All these things that they tell us are not fixable, that we should just look at the ground and worry about the abyss at our feet, as opposed to looking up and seeing Elon Musk throw a fucking rocket into space and then catch it. Fuck you, dudes. We can do anything. We can fix the budget. If he can do that, we can fix the budget. Yeah. If he can do that, we can fire the HR nannies. We can figure out how to balance the budget. We can figure out how to fund the unfunded liabilities. There's lots of talent out there that wants to do it. I mean, the amount of people volunteering for Doge, not to be paid, to volunteer, is off the charts.
Yeah. And not only do we have this political will and these examples internally, but externally, like the argument against all of this is falling flat because, let's point at El Salvador. They went from the most dangerous country in the world to the safest in 3 years, Argentina. came in, gutted their administrative state, and they're back on their feet pretty quickly. Like, why can't we do that? Like, that's where I'm excited for the American spirit to kick in, where you get that competitive nature. It's like, oh, these guys can do it. Like, what?
Human nature. It's not even American. It's not uniquely American. I mean, we have our own, spin on it, but it's just people. People are awesome, dude. Are you kidding? Like, this is what this was the day the day I realized that how incredibly persistent and phenomenal people really are, when I finally was able to internalize just how much they accomplished despite all of the shit that's thrown in front of them. And that happened very early, after, it happened within a few months of me hanging out over at LRC and reading stuff to me. So that was my spiritual awakening to this. That's when I literally just stood back and went, holy shit, people are awesome. How in the, when you really stop to think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, no. I'm not going to, being cynical doesn't cut it.
And the team that believes that people are awesome and can do these things just won. And the team that thinks or tries to make you believe that people are terrible just lost.
Mm-hmm. They just lost, and they're gonna lose, and they're gonna continue losing.
I mean, as a millennial, 33, we've talked about this before: 9/11, 08, WikiLeaks, Snowden, COVID. First time in my life, early 90s, don't remember too well, but first time in my life, like, oh shit, this is actually exciting.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I am just, it's funny. The longer this goes on, the more I willingly see whatever the burden is that needs to be borne to get this done. I bear it willingly. Whatever small part of it I can be a part of, I can affect to keep the ball rolling and to give people the information they need to decomplicate the world for them and demystify it so that they can go in their space, that's what I have to do. If I can help 5 people make a better goddamn decision about how to run their business tomorrow based on something I said in a podcast. Are you kidding? We would all kill to have that kind of, this is what we have. I mean, this is, how could you walk away from that? I mean, how could you? You couldn't walk away from it. You have to double down and work harder.
Yeah.
Period.
I mean, before we hit record, I said they should create a position, the czar of deconstructing the European communists,
European communism, because it's funny. There's here and there, a couple of people on Twitter have been like, dude, you should make Tom Treasury Secretary. I'm like, I'm not qualified for that. I will take the position of the czar of European destruction, of destroying communists. We'll get me, James Lindsay, Dexter White, and a few other people, and let's have a good old time with that. And we'll empower all the meme lords over at 4chan, and we'll just do the thing. It'll be great. So much talent out there, guys. There's so much talent that's been repressed, suppressed, offered to tune in, turn out, and drop out. No, they're all like, no, we're going to make this work. We can make this work. There's so much we can do. The old systems are brittle and fragile. They've built systems that are complex and unknowable, and therefore they're. This is where, Taleb, before he went, crazy over COVID, it was right. You build systems that are anti-fragile. They build systems that are maximally fragile. And so they're actually easy to take down if you understand where the breakpoints are.
Yeah. This is a signal right here. Bitcoin going up, all-time highs today.
That's one of them. Gold pushing past 3,000 will be another one. There's so many of them out there. But let me put it this way, Marty. Last thing to say. If Matt Gaetz winds up being AG, they have no power. They will pour every erg of political capital they can to stop Matt Gaetz from being AG. Trump put him out there for that purpose. Gaetz probably took one look at this is the conversation. Matt, I want to make AG. You're going to have to like fight tooth and claw for it. You may not get it. They're probably going to like destroy you, and they're trying to destroy you in the process. And the case is like, game on, motherfucker.
Yeah. Don't let your memes be dreams, freaks. You can do it. We're doing it.
That's right. All right, man. This sounds like a show. What do you think?
This was a great show. I mean, this is the least stressful show we've had in a while. I'm happy. Happy for you. Happy for all of us. Again, let's go build. It's like you have that weight off our shoulders.
Yeah. Let's go do something great. Like Elon Musk is like a 10-year-old boy. He wants to flip cars into space and go to Mars. Like let's enjoy that. And let's not and let's keep our eyes open for the next boss wanting to be the same as the old boss and all of that stuff. Let's continue to distrust but verify and all of those things that need to happen. But at the same time, don't sabotage yourself either.
Recognize when good things are happening.
Right. Just recognize that good things are happening. Not everything is going to be good. And, and if you make the perfect the enemy of the good, well, you're doomed to failure.
Yeah. We'll end it there. Thank you, Tom. We'll do it again at some point.
You're more than welcome, Marky.
Peace and love, freaks.